Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers. She's a lecturer at the Department of Film, Television and Media Studies at the University of Auckland, and her hair is the only naturally growing antidote to Michael Laws. Digital feminist and blogger Phoebe Fletcher. And here's the Darth Vader of the internet, minus the moment of redemption at the end. He's the thinking woman's bit of crumpet, if you define thinking woman as rabid right-wing mouth foamers who would sell their children's body organs on the free market just to make a point about supply and demand dynamics. Storm blogger Cameron Slater. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, issue 1, Auckland Unleashed. Sounds like a political fart, but did the day-long talkfest listen to Len Brown's spatial plan, or the Auckland-hating government just wanting to promote motorways for trucks? Issue 2, is John Key using the Christchurch earthquake as an excuse to slash and burn the public sector? Issue 3 tonight, at $569,000 per Tomahawk missile, isn't Gaddafi glad Obama decided to attack him during a recession? And we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off with issue 1. Auckland Unleashed was a one-day talk fest to launch Auckland's spatial plan, and the government were there to smother any talk of Auckland making its own mind up on the spatial plan. Phoebe, isn't John Key being disingenuous by holding up the pointless $2 billion Puhoi to Wellsford motorway extension as proof that he is getting Auckland moving but ignoring the Central Rail Loop?
Well, I noticed he didn't say that until we got to Wellington. I sat down and read through the 228-page report last night.
Yep.
And actually, Len Brown has done a fairly good job, I would have to say.
Connor Roberts wrote that.
Yeah.
Well, I think in terms of the spatial plan, it is really important that we have initiatives that go towards transport, and these initiatives need to be on public transport. In terms of the kind of cities that they are looking at, like San Francisco, transportation becomes a major problem once the city grows, which it is expected to phenomenally. We're looking at 2.1 million people by 2040. We need to think about, you know, if you live in Auckland at the moment, you spend a lot of time sitting on the motorways. We need to think about how we move.
Great. The petrol $2 a litre, it's fantastic on the
Cam,
motorway.
you're good friends of the National Party. Hump the leg of the mining industry, the farming industry and the trucking industry. Their preemptive strike on Len Brown's spatial plan is just trucks, motorways and more bloody trucks. Whose interests are National pursuing, Auckland's or trucking?
Well, it's really simple, Bomber. You guys love to hug public transport.
Love it.
Love it to pieces. But you know what? Without having trucks and without having a proper motorway network, then none of the goods and services and all of those things that are provided for.
Consider that.
The report
there were
did
a
in fact
considerable amount of space devoted to the fact that Auckland was a good
You have to
hub.
move things around by truck.
And the spatial plan considered that.
But you're just going on and on and on about trucks and they're evil.
But it is, isn't it?
The things that you enjoy and use on a day-to-day basis are delivered to and from ships and rail by trucks, and there is nothing that you can do to avoid that.
Shouldn't we get more rail? Get those trucks off the road?
No, because they still have to go from a ship onto a truck, onto a train, to the inland port, and then when you get to the inland port, now what do you do with it? You got to put it on a truck to then distribute it again.
Don't trucks cause as much damage to the motorways as what, 10,000 cars? Isn't that the equation?
No, because motorways are built to withstand heavy transport. What happens with heavy transport, if you knew anything about trucking, you'd know this, is that when you start slowing trucks down and putting them onto suburban roads to avoid traffic jams, that's when you get roading damage, because you've got axles that are creating torsion and torque on the road. So keeping them going in straight lines at 80 to 90 kilometres an hour is actually a good idea.
But this is just promotion for the trucking industry, isn't it?
Industry is what keeps the country going. It's what keeps funding the taxes that industry pays and road user charges and GST and all of those things are what fund your happy little world of increased civil servants.
But to be fair, I think that National is overplaying this. I mean, we had Rodney Hyde saying, look, we agree on 95% of what is in the plan. It's the additional 5%, which is really that central rail loop,
But how's that going to
also
stop
the tunnel that they disagree on. So, you know, they actually, there was an acknowledgement from the national government that they did deal with many of the roading issues well.
But the rail loop is not going to solve any problems. It's just going to cost
It's not going to solve
billions of
problems,
dollars.
but what it is going to do in terms of transporting citizens around the city, and this is
Taxis
something
do a
that we
far
need to
better
think
job.
about in terms of attracting international revenue into Auckland. We need to think about how we move towards being an international city.
Phoebe,
not
Len
trains.
Brown said his... You hate trains.
I
Phoebe... Len Brown said his vision for Auckland was, and I'm quoting, to transform Auckland's economy, to boost its quality of life, to turn it into the world's most livable city. We need to reach out to all 1.4 million people of this place for guidance, advice, encouragement and involvement. That's all very nice, but doesn't he need a to-do list? I mean, what does any of that mean as an Aucklander? As for you as an Aucklander, what does that mean?
Well, I actually was quite impressed by the report, as I said.
Easily impressed, obviously.
No, not easily impressed,
Yep.
but, you know, for someone that I guess has travelled and has been to other cities that,
Yep.
you know, attract people, they made some really good points about Los Angeles, you know. If you go to Los Angeles, that is a city where they have not spent enough money on public transport.
Yep.
And the result is that people are sitting in motorway jams for hours and hours of their day.
Yeah.
And what they are looking at is the kind of characteristics that make a city attractive to move to.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that we really need to consider.
What's Len's to-do list?
He hasn't had one.
I think there is a to-do list in that plan.
To get
I think,
re-elected.
Cameron, I think there's certainly, you know, the continuation of the roading projects that have already been nominated.
Yep.
We've got plans for, 85,000 more houses, because we've got growth and more commercial and industrial zones. So we're looking at extending parts of Auckland outwards. We're also looking at you know, basically kind of condensing the number of people that are in the inner city. There's an argument that we're not using our space effectively for housing. So I think they have considered those things. They have considered things like waste and so on. And we've also got the idea of how do we make this an attractive city for people to live in. One of these things is going to be whether people can move through the city. I mean, they're talking about attracting international investment. At the moment, 40% of Aucklanders are migrants. Okay, it's taking them on average 11 years to get back up to their professional status. So, you know, there are things that we're not doing as effectively as we can. We are a hub of productivity compared to New Zealand. I believe it was 152% more productivity than the rest of New Zealand in central Auckland.
Yep.
We contribute a large part to the GDP of New Zealand.
Absolutely.
And I think there does need to be some consideration, and some of this is going to be, okay, aesthetic concerns, which is why we've got this discussion about the tunnel rather than having another bridge that potentially goes through West Haven Marina. But part of it is going to be, can people get around? And I mean, if you go to cities in Australia, for example, or San Francisco, public transport is very good, and this becomes important as we increase in population.
Cam, since 1990, Auckland paid $7 billion in transport tax, but only received back $3 billion in transport infrastructure. When will Wellington give Auckland the investment it deserves?
When the rural rump of the National Party and the rural and the provinces who vote, you know, like Christchurch and Dunedin, who all vote for Labour, stop yanking the chain of the politicians. Because it's actually true that Auckland has paid a fortune, billions and billions of dollars, and the best roads in New Zealand are in the South Island. It's ridiculous.
Is that? Why is that?
People don't want to live in the South Island, we know that. They want to live in Auckland. So we need to build the things that we need here in Auckland, because it's actually the powerhouse of the country. But, you know, going back again to the argument over roads, you've got, you know, Pinko Liberals don't like spending on
soy
motorways.
latte drinking.
Soy latte drinking.
Yeah.
Pinko Liberals who carpool and you know, don't like catching public transport with other people. You guys say that you're in a catch-22 situation. You got a situation where you say we don't want to build more roads, because as soon as you build more roads, they fill up and then they're all blocked. And then the flip side of it is that
more public transport. And
no, the flip side of that is the current argument is, oh well, there's less and less people using the roads at the moment, so we don't need to spend the money on the roads.
I don't think that is the current argument, because if you look at their actual plan for the next 30 years, the first part of it is finishing off those existing roading projects. It is considered. I don't think the argument is whether we'd be spending it on roads, although it may have been spun that way by some sectors, whether it's, you know, spending more money on motorways versus
The thing is buses need roads to work.
spending money on public transport. I think the plan actually considers both. That was certainly the impression
If you're going
that
to have
I
a
got.
good public transport system in Auckland, the answer is not trains, it's buses.
But back to Wellington. When is Wellington going to give Auckland its dues? I mean, you've now got a super city saying to Wellington, we want our dues. Wellington's
The
not
problem
listening,
we've got with the super city and before the super city is Auckland's too busy fighting each other.
That's right.
Instead of taking the fight to Wellington.
Yep.
And
Cameron Brewer's part of that, isn't it?
And Len Brown's not going to change that either.
Yep.
I mean, it's a dog's breakfast, the current council, the way it's operating. There was an article yesterday in the paper that pointed out that all of the committees and the doubling up of work that's being done in the committees, that isn't talk fests and all of that sort of bollocks is not going to help the city.
I disagree with you to a certain extent. I mean, I return to that
That's
statement
a change. Normally you agree with me.
Rodney Hyde, okay, that, you know, we agree on 95% of the plan. I think that they are making a big issue about the tunnel. You know,
No,
we've
Len
got a
Brown is
mayor
making a big-
that is not a National Party mayor.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a left-leaning mayor.
rubbish.
If
They
it was
agree
John
on the
Banks,
majority
you'd know it
of,
would be
of the
different.
plan.
No.
This is an opportunity
A
to
tunnel-
kind of show who's boss.
You're
The
absolutely
tunnel
right.
costs
National
Question to
$4
both
billion,
of you.
bridge
Question to
costs
both
$2.
of you. Question to both of you. Did the government outmaneuver Len Brown by announcing the preemptive spatial pro-truck plan? And is Len Brown getting played by the government?
Yes,
by
Len Brown is,
coming out?
Len Brown is getting played by the
Yep.
government because Len Brown's vision is incredibly myopic. And that's the problem.
It's broad and
No, it's
wide-ranging.
not.
It's not
isn't.
myopic in any way, shape or form.
It's not. It's all focused around his little train set that he wants, right? And that's going to be the answer to all our problems. And it simply is not going to be the answer.
Rainbows and unicorns will flourish once we have rail. What's the situation here? He's getting outplayed, though, isn't he? By the preemptive. It wasn't outrageous, the preemption.
I think he is getting outplayed, and as I said, I think they're making a huge deal out of the 5% that they disagree on.
Yep.
I mean, in terms of the bridge versus tunnel debate, you're talking
The
about
answer's bridge.
$1.5 billion, and you know this.
You
You're
get
looking
two
at billions
bridges
of
for one
dollars that
tunnel.
they need to spend on services and transport over
Yeah.
the next 30 years anyway. So I think, you know, in some ways it is worth looking at these options. You know, what makes it a much more attractive city for international capital in the future.
To both of you on that then, government wants a new bridge, Len wants a tunnel, who's going to win?
Well, it comes down to cost. We're in a serious situation in terms of infrastructure, not in Auckland, but in Christchurch. You can't be going and have promising gold-plated solutions just because we don't want to have, you know, another bridge because it might not look good. The fact is that bridges are cheaper to make. You can build them faster than you can do with tunnels. And for the price of a tunnel, you can have 2 bridges. Now, we need 2 more harbour crossings in Auckland. Not 1 more, not 1 tunnel. We need 2 more.
Yeah, but the harbour bridge has got to be...
It's got to be taken down because it's rooted.
No,
right?
I think
So we actually need
there
2
is debate
crossings.
over this because there have been several reports, some of which have said, you know, the trusses aren't going to last in terms of their reinforcement for the next 20 years, and then other ones that say, look, we've actually got more than 50 years.
Right.
So, and there was a 2008 report, I believe, by the Auckland City Council that said that the tunnel was actually the favourable option.
No, that's 'cause
so I
John
think there's
Banks
a
wanted
fair
that,
degree of
right?
kind of politicking that is
Richard
going
Simpson
on at the
had a much
moment.
better
Question you to
solution
both.
with the
Question you to
Anzac
both.
Bridge.
What's one thing you would do to make Auckland better? One thing. Right now, as an Aucklander, what is one thing you would do to make Auckland better?
I'd get rid of Len Brown as a mayor.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. Okay, one thing you would... I try and give you a moment and you ruin it. What is the one thing you would
enjoyed the
do?
moment.
One thing you would do to make Auckland better?
I think it definitely has to be public transport. As someone that has lived in many suburbs in Auckland, you know, there are places here that is really difficult to get to. I mean, if you live out in West
Not in
Auckland,
a
for
car.
example,
One thing I would do to make Auckland just that little bit better is I would suggest that all of the main streets, whether it's Queen Street in Central Auckland, the main street of South Auckland, West Auckland, North Shore, shut it off to cars and make it pedestrian. And actually bring those people
shut
into
the Great South Road off to cars.
to bring those
Good on
people
you.
into the
Well
areas and the main retail strip.
There isn't one in Manukau.
Well, that's what they need to build. They be able to get that going and green it up and allow pedestrians to move around. That's one idea.
And what happens when you have a CBD and you have a major earthquake?
Let's
doesn't work so good, does it?
See, kills off every good idea. Issue 2, working for families, interest-free student loans, and Benny bashing. Forget the mother of all budgets, here comes the father of all budgets, and Dad is a nasty drunk with a penchant for grievous bodily harm. Is John Key using the Christchurch earthquake as an excuse to promote a small government neoliberal wet dream? Phoebe, John Key said there were 3 ways the government could raise the revenue needed to repair Christchurch, either by borrowing, through a levy, or by trimming expenditure. He's going for the last with a zero budget. Why can't those who have benefited most from the tax cuts be asked to pay for more?
So it's a very good
They're
question.
Paying,
No, Cameron. I think that, you know, in some ways they do need to cut back on the budget, okay? We've had the IMF warning New Zealand, and I think Tariq Ali was making this point the other night that, you know, we have just gone through a year and a half or so where we have seen 3 major European economies nearly fail. We saw, you know, Iceland, Ireland and Greece nearly go under. So New Zealand does really need to think about its debt, which is, you know, pitched to kind of push out to 30%. In terms of the tax cuts, for example, you know, for companies, they just got a 2% tax cut, which is costing around $1 billion. I do think that they could look at other places for savings. I do believe that, you know, Phil Goff is perhaps attacking on the wrong point, okay? If we look at working for families, you know, that he attacked on the tax cut, on the cuts to that for people earning over $100,000. Well, that's not, you know, that's not your average New Zealander.
No.
It's like 43% of New Zealanders earn less than $20,000 a year. Those are middle class families. I think the figures have, you know, been quite dicey coming out about that. You had at first that said, you know, it would be sort of up to $250 million that they would save off that particular exercise. Now we're seeing it, Goff actually asked a parliamentary question that it was around 26 million. To me that sort of says that Labor in some ways are going for the centre, okay? They have to go for the centre, yeah, absolutely. But I think we are going to see cuts to other things. One thing I would be worried about are things like the Ministry of Women's Affairs.
Good idea. Families Commission.
Is your name Phoebe? No, it isn't. Go on.
She's rabbited on enough. It's my
Cam, cutting working for families will only save $27 million. And while you and your right-wing buddies call it middle-class welfare, you fail to understand that it's welfare that makes those receiving it feel like they're middle class. National are risking a lot politically for little gain here, aren't they?
Well, isn't that what a brave politician should do? Sometimes you have to make the hard decisions. That's why we elect
Calling
MPs.
it bravery, are you?
No, that's why you elect MPs, to make hard decisions. We're in a recession. We have, as Phoebe correctly pointed out, we've seen some European nations that pretty much fell over, bankrupt. We've been warned that we're in a similar situation. We can't keep on endlessly borrowing money to provide welfare. And when I say welfare, that's as broad as it is.
We can borrow $120 million a week for tax cuts. You don't have a problem with that. But the second it goes to a wider group of people, that's exactly what we're doing.
It is not exactly what we're doing. Are you saying that the whole $300 million a week? See, that's the thing. You say that we can't keep borrowing $300 million a week. And yet in your lead into this, you said we've got 3 choices. We can borrow more, we can create a levy, or we can...
what we're borrowing for, though. That's the question. What we're doing surely is, if we're borrowing for tax cuts for the welfare,
you can borrow for infrastructure.
Outrageous.
You can borrow for infrastructure because that's what you do when you're buying a house.
That's right. No problems there. But borrowing for tax cuts is a problem.
If we're borrowing for tax cuts, we're also borrowing for working for families. We're also borrowing for pensions. We're also borrowing for student loans. If it's not good enough to borrow for tax cuts, it's not good enough to borrow for... There is no outcome from student loans.
For student loans, the reason we were given student loans, which you were so quick to forget, which you are so quick to forget... Hold on. The point that I want to make with you on student loans is this. You were the first
you being a perpetual student.
You and your friends on the right were the first to jump up and down about the brain drain. You were always... That was your big meeting in 2008. What the student loan interest-free policy is there for is it's only given to you if you stay in New Zealand. If you leave New Zealand, you don't have it. That's
right.
the point. So you've got the one piece you've got to keep students here.
That's rubbish.
The one piece you've got to keep students here, you're throwing out.
You throw it out. It's rubbish. We
Can
can't afford it.
Can I just interject and say that the IMF did actually talk about student loans and say that we should be looking at more direct forms of investment. Yep. I do think that they do have a point there that we have overburdened our young people massively with loans that are taking them 40 years to pay off.
That's right.
National have said that they won't touch the interest-free portion of the loans. They've said that they will tighten the restrictions. But I do think that there is an argument that we should be more directly investing in education rather than strangling our nation with debt.
Phoebe John Key said that despite the quake, he was pushing ahead with the Benny Bash and welfare reforms. Where do solo mums find jobs in Christchurch, and do under-twos need nurturing, or do they need Paula Bennett's baby farms?
Well, they're already in those baby farms.
I think under-twos do need nurturing, and one thing I would argue is that with National at the moment, I think that while there's a Christchurch earthquake and that's a concern, I think they would have gone ahead and done what they wanted anyway. I mean, if you look at the percentage of time that they've spent in urgency in the House, and I've always said this, that National are extremely undemocratic in the amount of time that they have spent under urgency and not letting people consider bills. I think we do need to look very closely at the kind of reforms that they will make.
Cam, the reality is that the economy had double dipped in 2010 before the quake. Key is just trying it on here, isn't he? I mean, National wanted to abolish working for families, interest-free student loans and Benny bashing well before the quake. This is the opportunity.
You're putting words in their mouth. They haven't wanted to abolish it. They seriously, though, were elected in 2008
on change,
and on
ill-defined change,
ill-defined.
Labour light.
They still
Obama-like,
still elected.
Obama-like,
still elected on that.
Yeah.
There does need to be a realignment of all of the programs that Labour promised in times that they said, and Michael Cohen said it, these are structural surpluses. Well, where are the structural surpluses? They're not there. And so we can't keep spending the percentage that we are of GDP on all of these welfare programs.
Pretty quick to give 1.7 billion to Mr Magoo and South Canterbury Finance, weren't we? Very quick to hand over money to Warner Brothers, weren't we? Very quick there. Who wins, who loses by John Key's father of all budgets? Who wins, who loses?
Well, I think it's likely to be the disadvantaged people that lose. I mean, I would absolutely agree with both of you in some respects. I mean, I agree with Cameron in that I think that we need to look very closely at spending, but I also agree with you in that we're targeting the wrong people. I mean, tax cuts are something that Australia, America have tried, really it hasn't done much.
Who wins, who loses, John Key's father of all budgets?
Well, we need to see the budget first. There's a lot of supposition going on. You're assuming that there's going to be wholesale cuts, and I don't believe that's the case.
Well, I'm glad you can live in that fantasy land.
John Key's come out and said that he's going to keep the...
he also said he wouldn't raise GST. Yeah. Thank you, panel. Coming up is the bombing of Libya, a brave decision to save civilians, or further proof of the West's craven double standards. Citizen A is back after the break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Citizen A. We're reviewing the week with bloggers Phoebe Fletcher and that awful Cameron Slater. Issue 3 this week. Operation Odyssey Dawn began last week with the UN greenlighting a plan to protect civilians from Gaddafi's vicious and bloody crackdown on protesters. Humanitarian necessity or oil-drenched Western double standards? Phoebe, we couldn't move fast enough to implement this UN resolution to bomb Libya. Yet UN Resolution 242 relating to Israel withdrawing from occupied Palestinian land hasn't been implemented at all. When are we enforcing a no-fly zone over Gaza and the West Bank?
I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, we've had the UN investigator this week, just over the last day or so, actually say that that is tantamount to genocide, what they are doing in the Gaza Strip at the moment. This argument has been made many times before, but, the hypocrisy of this is something that is worth highlighting. We had the Saudis go into Bahrain to completely oppress their protests. The Saudis, of course, are, a major US ally. They're beginning to get very nervous. I noticed that last night they actually announced that they would be going ahead with municipal elections. Okay, so the Saudis are beginning to get nervous. Syria, we had them opening up the internet a bit, but we're looking like they may be on a verge of a revolution there.
Crackdowns in Yemen as well?
crackdowns in Yemen. I mean,
it's a basket place. The whole
it is
area.
not a basket place. I mean, these are people. If you look at somewhere like Syria, that's had banned protests since 1963.
Yeah.
This, these are completely undemocratic dictatorships. In terms of Libya, I don't think that the US so much really did want to intervene. The impression that I got was that the Pentagon and that US Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, they know that the model of kind of short wars isn't working from Iraq and Afghanistan. And, to them, intervention was perhaps something that they shouldn't do. But I think that there was like a lot of public pressure from people. And, Tariq Ali was saying the same thing. We've had the politicians interfering. Whether it will work or not, I don't know, because I think it actually may work to give a groundswell of anti-Western sentiment again in that region, and that is the risk that we run. I mean, in terms of UN Resolution 1973, there's a lot of debate going on at the moment over whether that is actually legal for them to go and intervene, and also with no-fly zones, we do need to remember that these are major military manoeuvres. They do involve firing, of course, as we've seen on military compounds and so on. And, as we've seen in Iraq and Kosovo, these can actually radically raise the number of civilian casualties. I was against a no-fly zone until the rebel leaders actually began calling for it, and then at that point I thought, that it really is the people in Libya that should be making the decision on that. What I worry about is the concessions that they're going to have to make in the future. I mean, we've had, BP Oil, of course, are right in there. They've just started drilling this week in Libya because they did a big deal back in 2007, I believe it was, for the oil. So I really sort of worry about what kind of concessions the rebels might have to make in the future, like how this is going to affect them.
Cam, you love guns.
Big guns.
And I'm guessing you're disappointed we haven't deployed thermonuclear weapons yet. But the reality is
it's been a while since we
that this is going to be a stalemate, isn't it? Attacking Gaddafi's forces to protect civilians is one thing. Bombing Gaddafi's army when it's not engaged, that's another thing, isn't it?
Bombing Gaddafi's anything is bad. How? I mean, Gaddafi used to.
So it's regime change. It's not about protecting civilians.
It's always going to be.
That's what the Arab League agreed to.
It's always going to be about regime change in any of these Arab countries. They've never had democracy in any of them ever. It's always been lurching from one dictatorship of one form or another from time to time.
Propped up by the West.
Well, since when was Gaddafi ever propped up by the West? I
mean, he got a nice welcome, didn't he?
Well, you've had the head of the London School of Economics fired. You've had like this huge industry exposed of PR, and I would disagree in terms of them not wanting democracy. I mean, you've really just got to look at somewhere like Algeria, where you had 200,000 people lose their lives.
They wanted democracy. Hold on, okay, but back to the point. So you think that it's not just about protecting the civilians. You think this is an opportunity to throw Gaddafi out?
Get rid of him. The thing is that Gaddafi's been largely quiet for about 20 years, and he was made to shut up basically by American F-111 bombers flying out of the UK and then round through the Straits of Gibraltar and dropping a couple of bombs on some tents in his compound, and said, "We can get you any time we want. Shut up," and he did. And he was largely quiet. Apart from a little bit of state-sponsored terrorism, which then involved the Lockerbie bombing and all of that sort of situation. But largely he was quiet. He's now out there slaughtering his citizens in his desperate bid to stay in power. He should just be taken out.
So the guy's as mad as a snake. But the UN resolution isn't about taking Gaddafi out. It was about protecting the civilians, wasn't it?
Yes, but you can't go dropping bombs. This is the stupidity of the UN. You can't say we're going to enforce a UN resolution and we're going to protect civilians by taking out Gaddafi's military. You can't drop bombs without there being collateral damage, right? You just can't do it. Even with the precision-guided weapons that we have today, if the bomb lands on a government building which happens to be in the middle of a residential suburb, there is going to be the possibility that civilians get...
So at what point do the deaths that we cause... Okay, so at what point do the deaths we cause somehow morally equate to the deaths he's causing?
But what's your option? Leave him there?
I think
what's your option?
The thing is that this is kind of rubbish on him being quiet, I have to say. Like, you have had him for example, coming out over the last week or so and
This
saying
last
to the
week,
French, you
20
know,
years,
hey, what
yes.
about all the money that I donated to you guys? You know,
he
why
was
are you
very
supporting
he was very
the
loud
rebels?
about that, wasn't he? Very quickly on Libya, what happens next? Quick prediction. What happens next?
Well, Gaddafi's not hard to find out where he is. I just think he should just take a couple of tomahawks right in the keister, and that'd be the end of it.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen, though, is it? Prediction: what's going to happen in Libya?
I think we're going to have to watch this very closely. I mean, I don't think it can drag on for too long, because if you look at Libya, there's really nowhere to hide. It is a desert country. But I think the real issue is actually the refugees that are arriving in Italy. I mean, this is what is you know, spurning the international community to action. So yes, it is a hypocrisy in that.
Let's wrap the show with last word. Phoebe, your last word this week is?
I think it has to be about the hikoi, actually. I think that Tim Selwyn has been doing, my co-blogger Tim Selwyn has been doing some wonderful blogs on this, on the Takatai Mana Whenua bill. I think this is going to, you know, while a lot of Pākehā aren't paying attention to it, this is going to have major ramifications for the Māori Party, and perhaps international also, because, you know, you've got concerns within their circles whether, you know, ACT are going to make 5% next election. So, you know, they're going to be needing that Māori Party coalition. We've effectively reversed on, you know, the reasons why that party was formed in the first place. And I think
Māori
that
Party
there may
big
be
problems,
eventually a bit of a backlash against that.
Cam, your final word this week is?
Phil Goff needs to get some better advice.
This is about Hughes.
He's right now hugging a corpse. And Whale Oil's rules of politics has never hugged a corpse. It gets eventually very stinky, and the stink then passes on to you. And Phil Goff and Annette King have got real problems right now, and whoever's advising them seriously needs to be fired, because it's not working.
I've got this I hate to agree with them, but thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, Cam. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. The unprecedented global financial economic meltdown in 2008 set the scene for governments to push the full impact of that crisis down the track a couple of years, with quantitative easing and low interest rates in a desperate attempt to keep the consumer culture mechanics that have fueled the boom alive and well. They've failed. Bernard Hickey this week, still on his road from Damascus to the Kremlin, notes that consumer culture economics have been forever changed as New Zealanders stop shopping and slip into survival mode. New Zealand was already in a near double-dip recession before the earthquake. What is required now is real Keynesian capitalism. The state becomes the only economic driver in a market where financial private enterprise, through their own greed and lack of regulation, have proven unable to be trusted. John Key's response to such a reality is the exact opposite of what is needed. By using the Christchurch earthquake to justify mass public service cutbacks, he is simply implementing failed neoliberal small government ideology. Luckily for John Key, the Shire Volk of New Zealand just love his smile and wave. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Citizen Bomber Facebook page. Don't forget, next week is the first debate between Auckland Central frontrunners Nikki Kaye and Jacinda Ardern. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.